You know, for centuries, we've been totally fascinated by these profound, transformative states of consciousness, experiences that kind of defy everyday language. People call them mystical, spiritual, visionary. But can these deeply personal moments actually be understood by science? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into.
So, back in 1954, the author Aldous Huxley wrote these words to describe what he felt after taking mescaline, which is a substance that comes from the peyote cactus. And get this, he wasn't just, hallucinating. He felt like he was seeing reality with this shocking, raw clarity. This quote just perfectly nails the kind of profound shift we're going to explore.
And this brings up a really fundamental question, right? Is an experience of naked existence something that can only ever be described in poetry and metaphor? Or can we actually bring the tools of science into the picture to measure it, understand it, and maybe even replicate it? That's the central mystery we're going to try and unpack today.
So to kick things off, we've got to wrestle with this huge philosophical problem that Huxley himself laid out. How do you even start talking about, let alone studying, our private inner worlds?
Huxley had this really beautiful but also kind of lonely idea. He saw each of us as an island universe. Our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, they're all fundamentally private. Sure, we can use language and symbols to try and describe our island to someone else, but they can never actually visit. So in a way, we're all kind of stuck in our own heads, right?
All right, so here's the kicker for Huxley. He wondered if certain substances could act like a bridge between these island universes. Could they let you, just for a moment, tweak your own consciousness so you could finally get what mystics and visionaries had been trying to describe for thousands of years?
And that's exactly what pushed him to do his own experiment. Yeah, he basically became the guinea pig in a quest to see if he could visit one of those other islands.
Okay, now this is where it gets super interesting. What he thought would happen versus what actually happened. Huxley had read all the research. He expected to close his eyes and see these wild, colorful patterns, mythical figures, all that stuff. But nope, that's not what happened at all. For him, the huge transformation wasn't inside his head. It was in the world right in front of him. The flowers in a vase, the books on a shelf, they were suddenly just glowing with this intense, miraculous existence.
I mean, Huxley's description in his book The Doors of Perception was a total game changer. But, as powerful as his story was, it was still just that, one guy's story, an anecdote. For science to really get a grip on this thing, it needed to move beyond poetry. It needed numbers. It needed cold, hard data.
And that need for data? Well, that brings us to the next chapter of this whole story, where researchers took up the challenge to get real scientific about these mystical states.
And check this out. This document right here is the turning point. This is the cover of Walter Pahnke's 1963 PhD dissertation from Harvard. His goal was, frankly, huge: to investigate these mystical experiences using a proper scientific method, a double-blind controlled experiment. I mean, back then, this was a seriously radical idea.
So, okay, how in the world do you measure something like a mystical experience? Pahnke's first move was to build a framework. He dove into the writings of mystics from all different traditions throughout history and started pulling out the common themes. He boiled them down into 9 distinct categories, things like a sense of unity, the feeling that it's temporary or transiency, and a deeply felt positive mood. He basically created a ruler for mysticism. Pretty amazing.
All right, before we jump into his results, we got to do a quick breakdown of a key concept, the p-value. So super simply, it's just a way to measure how likely it is that your results happen by pure chance. A small p-value, usually less than 0.05, tells scientists that the effect they're seeing is probably legit. It wasn't just a coincidence. Okay, so with that system all set up, Pahnke ran his experiment. He gave psilocybin, that's the active compound in magic mushrooms, to one group and an active placebo to a control group. So let's actually look at the data.
And right off the bat, the main result was just crystal clear. As you can see from this little snippet from his summary, the group that got the psilocybin had a statistically significant different experience. Their scores for all those mystical categories, way, way higher. We're talking less than a 2 in 100 chance the results were random for 8 of the 9 categories.
Let's zoom in on just one of these categories to see what I mean. This table shows the results for transiency. That's the feeling that the state is temporary. The p-value was less than 0.004. To put that into perspective for you, that means there were less than 4 chances in 1,000 that this dramatic difference was just a coincidence. Yeah, the data was just incredibly strong.
And you see the same kind of thing for that unity category. Look at these p-values from the questionnaire. Things like expansion of usual personal consciousness and a sense of belonging to a new and greater unity scored so much higher in the psilocybin group. For the first time, science was actually measuring the building blocks of a mystical state. It's wild. But you gotta remember, behind all these numbers and p-values are real, profound human experiences. This quote is directly from one of the participants in the study, and it just puts a face on the data. It connects all the clinical findings back to that raw, transformative power that Huxley first wrote about. This isn't just a data point. For this person, this was a life-altering moment.
And here's the thing, the effects really stuck around. This is data from 6 months after the experiment. The people who got the psilocybin rated the experience as way more useful and valuable to their lives. And again, look at those p-values. They're super low, which tells us this was a real, lasting, positive change.
So what does all this add up to? I mean, where does this kind of groundbreaking research even lead?
Well, this is Pahnke's own conclusion, straight from his dissertation. What he wrote was that the evidence was pretty clear. Psilocybin, when it's given in the right conditions, can trigger experiences that are pretty much indistinguishable from those experienced by the mystics. This was like a landmark moment. Science was confirming it.
All right, so let's wrap this up and hit the key takeaways here. First, those wild, hard-to-describe mystical experiences, they actually have things in common that you can define. Second, you can actually measure those characteristics in a scientific way. Third, substances like psilocybin can reliably bring about these states. And finally, and this is super important, the context, what researchers call set and setting, is absolutely crucial to the whole experience.
You see, Pahnke's work didn't just answer a question. It blew the doors open to a ton of new ones. It proved that one of the most profound, most private areas of human experience could actually be brought into the lab. So the final thought I want to leave you with is this. If a mystical state can be studied, what other mysteries of our own minds are just waiting for the right questions and the right tools to be explored?